Hey there, and thank you for listening to the Dream Center Peoria podcast. Dream Center Peoria exists to impact families living in poverty, starting with kids and youth. If you want to learn more about what we're up to at the Dream Center, you can find us online at dreamcenterpeoria.org or on social media at Dream Center Peoria. Thanks for listening.
Hi, my name's Andy King from Dream Center Peoria, and welcome to another edition of New Reality Podcast. As you know, we've been doing something a little bit different here at the Dream Center. During this time with the pandemic going on, we've wanted to connect with people a little bit more frequently. And so we've been reaching out to many different people throughout, not just our community, but throughout the world, and just been connecting with people and trying to bring a bit of hope during this time. And so today I am super excited to have with us on the podcast, Amy Grant, which is unbelievable. How are you doing, Amy?
Hey, Andy, I'm good. It's kind of quiet here at our house.
Well, you are in Nashville, correct? That's where
Yes.
you're at. And obviously during this time has been a little bit different for you. You had a packed spring ready to go out on the road, and things changed, correct?
Yes, we were 2 weekends into a tour that we had just worked so hard to pull together. We had like slightly revamped all of our songs. We had two of the singers that have traveled with me for years had each learned keyboard parts. We were trying to like go back and recapture more of the album version of old songs. I mean, we were just like, woohoo! And then the second weekend into the tour, we did the Friday and Saturday show, and then everything was shut down. And so, and my husband, Vince, was on the road with the Eagles. I mean, they had an entire spring booked, and he and his dearest and oldest friend, who has been his guitar tech for the last 30 years, but they've been friends since they were in the 6th grade, that they're just like, everybody went home. And just how quickly life can change. So Vince and I are unemployed. Music will be the last thing to come back. And 2 weeks after they got off the road, Vince's dear friend Benny was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And he's passed.
Wow.
And so it's just like, man, it just changed so much shift. And our lives feel very quiet right now.
Yeah.
And we're used to kind of being in the thick of things, but I tell myself, well, I think we're doing the job we're supposed to do by supporting where we can financially, and then just staying put at home. And that's weird for somebody that's used to like, come on, let's go. Let's pack a bag.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to paint the picture for a lot of people who may be watching or listening. You have had a very successful music career. I was just reading last night some of the things. So I know you hate this type of stuff where people are acknowledging stuff, but this is, you started back in 1979 with your first album. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. This is
78.
78. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. This is all from Wikipedia,
You can't trust Wikipedia. I've been singing a long time. That's it.
A long time. We do know you've had 6 Grammys. You had 2 #1 hits. This is where it got really crazy for me. Over 30 million records you've sold.
Back when people used to buy records. Yep.
And then back in December of last year, you were given an award for 1 billion downloads. That is crazy.
Yeah. Streams. I don't know if that's the same thing as a download.
Streams,
it's a different
downloads.
World.
Yeah. How has that world changed for you? Because like you said, 30 million albums were vinyl, CDs, tapes.
Yeah.
Then go into the world of the download and the stream. How did that change your industry and what you do?
Um, well, I think, um, I guess I came up in an era that to really be heard, you had to be backed by a big company. You
Mm,
know, your best shot was being signed to a record label, especially a great record label.
mm,
And now it's totally different. I mean, the stage is wide open for anybody to collect followers. And so, I mean, that's kind of cool. And there's
yeah,
just so much available. Um, looking back, I don't know if it will be like, um, I don't know what it'll be like. I grew up in the cutting my teeth on the music of the late 60s, 70s, and 80s. And when you sing a song from back then, I mean, there was just only the radio station and the record store. So everybody was kind of singing the same stuff.
right.
And I think now it's just like, there's so much. I don't know if people will look back on this time and everybody know the same hits because it's
Yeah,
just different. There's
yeah,
so much beautiful diversity.
yeah.
So it's, life kind of is always changing, but some things stay the same. Music helps.
And obviously being around, you're married to Vince Gill, so there is music in your house constantly. And also, I know during this time, I know you guys have done a few shows um, at the Opry with your daughter Karina and Jenny, who's Vince's daughter. I watched one of those when Karina got going. I was like, "Whoa, this is in the genes."
I know. It was fun. So today, I was making her breakfast when I was having lunch, but then we were talking about song ideas. And mostly what I love these days is cheering on
Mm,
my kids in whatever their passions,
yeah,
whatever their passions might be. But just Karina's got a couple of songs that she's working on, and I just love that. I don't know, just she'll sing two or three lines, and it just feels so good. And
yeah,
she lets me throw my ideas in and without, like, I'm not trying to germ my way into her song, but
right,
you know, I don't know. She's gracious in l- letting me talk through ideas, and she'll say, "Well, it's like where would you hear this going?" And we kind of talk through because the story is everything in a song.
yeah,
But then she'll take that and come back a day later, and I'll go, "Oh my gosh, you watered that seed until it was like in full bloom." And that
yeah,
there's nothing that puts a bigger smile on my face than watching my kids shine.
yeah. And I'm the same. I've got three kids, and
And
one
so
of
they're
our
also musical.
oh, and they, Clay, who's our middle child,
Yes.
has actually moved out to Los Angeles,
That's
and
great.
he's out there. He's only been out there a few months. He wants to be a part of the Mosaic Church out there.
Uh-huh.
There's a church. Owen McManus is the pastor out there, and it's actually across the street. Their church is across the street from the Hollywood Walk, Hollywood Stars.
Yeah.
The Hollywood Star there, and he was just about to get involved. He's an incredible musician, but also incredible at creating soundtracks and bringing sounds from different things. And so we've just been on the sideline, just cheering him on, and Ethan's still drumming and
Yeah.
just cheering him on and saying, because you're right. There's something where for years you're trying to be that person that's trying to make it or just to have a good time on stage, but then to see your kids get on stage, it's totally different.
Yep.
It's so good. It's so good.
Yes. And all
Um,
of us, our dreams are, I love your dream of the Dream Center. That's your passion and your dream, but we have to let our kids be free to find their own dreams.
yeah,
It
that's
makes you
good.
want to make the most of your time and energy because you go, I'm not sure who's picking up this baton when I'm done, but it just makes you want to do everything you can with the dreams in your own heart.
Yeah. Well, it was, we talk about music back in the day, and it was in '92. I had to do this, Amy. You
This is
probably
how
know
we
what's
met.
coming. Yeah, yeah. Because back in the day in England, Christian music wasn't a big deal. Like
Right.
now, it's obviously a lot bigger. There's amazing artists that are out that have come from England, and but back in 1991, when we first met, there was nothing. And I remember I would get these CDs sent to me from Word Records in America, and yourself, Michael W. Smith, Petra, all these different bands back then. And I remember you made the switch from not just singing to a Christian crowd, but to everyone, right? That your music was going to go, what they would say, secular. And I know over here there was a bit of controversy to that, but yet in England, the Christians were like cheering you on, because it was like an underground movement. The Christian music movement was so underground. And I remember you were coming to Nottingham, which is in the middle of England, and I waited 6 or 7 hours in the rain at the back door. I have the picture, okay?
Oh,
So this is the picture
oh
of
my
me
gosh.
meeting you back then. Look at them glasses. That's
That's
amazing.
crazy. That's us. Yep.
Yeah, can you believe
Well,
that? So,
yep.
that was back, and I was pretty drenched. And then the thing that was crazy about the whole thing was we met. You were very kind. Who's this weird English kid on the street looking wet? But then I'd written you a letter thanking you for being a voice to the nation, because there was no Christian music. And I remember about 3 or 4 weeks later receiving a handwritten note from you with a picture. You didn't have press pictures. You only had a personal picture. It was with you and Millie. You wrote on it and sent it to me. And looking back on it, that is exactly your character of just not being just someone on a stage, but someone off the stage. And we've got many stories like that since then, of off the stage. But what do you think is, you see obviously a lot of people make it in music industry. What do you feel drives you back then and now to really connect? What is it that really, because back then you connected with me just by a photo and a letter, but yet it lasted for a long time. What drives you to do stuff like that?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say exactly what was in my head back then, but I've always known that music is, music just helps us connect to ourselves and to each other, to what we believe. It could be to what we dream about, and I love that kind of connection. I just, um, I was raised in a very loving home. My mom and dad, um, I have 3 older sisters, and we were kind of nestled in a much bigger family. And I just, I, I something that you've enjoyed, you want somebody else to enjoy.
Yeah.
And I feel like I grew up knowing I was loved, not only by my family, but by God, that my life mattered, not because of whatever great things I was going to do, but just simply it mattered because I was loved. And, you know, I, I, I want other people to know that also.
Yeah.
Um, and, and sometimes it happens with a song, and sometimes it happens through, just by the way, I've gotten a lot of letters I've never responded to. There was a time in my life, it was just like there was so much coming at me. It was like drinking out of
Yeah.
a fire hose. So
Yeah.
I'm always shocked that we actually connected through that letter, because that was kind of that busy time.
I think you were just sad for me and sorry for me because I was so wet and drenched. It's
You let
like,
it so
let's do something for this guy.
Yeah, I don't know. You must have made an impression on me. But yeah, um, that's that's just as much as I can remember the question you asked me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember that time, we, about a week or so later, you had an hour and a half concert live on BBC Radio 1. And it was, it was like a night show they were playing. And just looking back, obviously the BBC is a huge media outlet in the UK, especially the radio. Radio 1 is massive. That was a huge step, I feel, not just for you, but for Christian music or Christian artists who were making that step over, saying, hey, we can still be cool. We can still do great music. We just don't have to go down certain avenues of themes and things like that. And so for me, just saying thank you for that time, because it was memorable. And I really did feel it paved the way for a lot of artists in the UK to go, if Amy can do it, we can give it a shot. And you've seen that over the years with many different artists in the UK. So thank you for that. We then met after that. We have to jump forward to 2011. And this was when you were on tour with Michael W. Smith. Mm-hmm. And one of those guys that I'm talking about, the British guys who made a big impression, was a guy called Stu G, who was with the band Delirious. And Stu now is Michael W. Smith's guitarist. And back in 2011, you were with Michael in Peoria, and Stu wanted to come and see the Dream Center. He had been around the Dream Center a few years earlier. Right. And he said, hey, come and pick me up at the hotel and we'll go and see the Dream Center. And as I walked into the hotel, you were there that morning, and Stu introduced me to yourself. I didn't go all groupie and brought back all the memories and the pictures from England, but you did ask a question that I think sparked something in you for the Dream Center. And you turned to me and said, so Andy, what do you do? And I just shared my heart about the Dream Center, about impacting families that are living in poverty, especially starting with kids and youth. And from that, we started going back and forth over the next few months to where you ended up coming to the Dream Center, which was a God thing, because you didn't know all the things that were going on at the time. But we met in the January. Me and my wife went down to Nashville to meet with you. And then a few months later, the homeless shelter that was in our building that was being ran by the YWCA, that organization went bankrupt. And we were left with a decision to whether we should take that on or make more people homeless. That was a $400,000 decision to carry that on. And we felt we had to take it on. We'd already planned your event back in January. Mm-hmm. We signed the papers to take on the homeless shelter the week before your event happened at the Dream Center in October. And I'll always remember that, because we were going into this on pure faith. We'd never run a homeless shelter before. We'd never run a homeless shelter with the majority of our students and kids. We have 80 to 100 people in our homeless shelter. The average age is 9 years of age. So we'd never done that before. So we signed the papers, we took it on, and then the week later, you came to do an event where we honored Mayor Maloof, and I know you remember
Oh
Mayor
my
Maloof.
goodness. Yes.
And that night, it wasn't even really a fundraiser. We just wanted to connect people to the Dream Center. We were still fairly new.
Yeah.
And that night we raised over $50,000, which was exactly enough to get us through into the next year and to really start momentum. And so I want us to go back to that night, because it was a fun night. Mayor Maloof, actually, that was his last birthday. He was 93, and he passed away the following January, full of life. If you're not from Peoria area, Mayor Maloof started the St. Jude affiliate here in Peoria and was a part of the St. Jude movement in this nation, back with Danny Thomas. And so it was amazing to honor him, but also to have you. And you had been involved with St. Jude before, correct?
I had. It was just such a, I love recognizing ways that we're all connected. In fact, I think when you see the world as everybody being connected, you live differently. It's never us and them. It's an awareness that everyone is welcome at the table. It affects how you resolve problems. It affects how you look at somebody on the other side of the argument. It's just like, okay, I have an old friend. He's a World War II veteran, and his name is Jimmy Gentry. And he said, the single most important word, Amy, do you know what that is? And I was like, God. He said, nope. Love, forgiveness. I'm just trying to please old Jimmy. And he said, when you know what the most important word is, it will change everything about the way you live. And I said, I give up. And he said, we. We is the most important word. Wow. And when I found, we talked about the Maloof family, and I had first gotten involved with anybody from the American Lebanese, the Alsace, that's done so much great work in the U.S. through St. Jude. And Mr. Maloof was the last founding member of St. Jude that was still alive, and he was in Peoria. So I was like, oh my gosh, I felt such an affiliation and an affinity for him. And anyway, and just brainstorming about how to bring people together, that's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah.
And I thought what was so beautiful about that night is we wanted people to know about the Dream Center, but we did it in the context of honoring this amazing man and the impact that he has had in his lifetime. And it was just one of my favorite photographs is of the two of us. I'm not even sure who took it, laughing. And it was just like, okay, Mr. Maloof and myself. So, God, it was just so beautiful.
And that was the start. I mean, for us, it was a real, a launching pad with taking on the homeless shelter. And also we have 21 apartments where we transition people from homelessness into an apartment where we create the network of friends and family and get them jobs, the huge support system. And we right now have a 91% success rate that those folks that leave the village, we call it the village, never go back to homelessness. And so that is where you talk about the we.
Yes.
The folks we see are coming to Peoria for a reason, that maybe a job or a boyfriend, they go south and they're left here on their own. So we become the we, and with you coming that night, brought a lot more people around the table, and that really was a significant night for us. And if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, we will have a link just to a highlight reel of the night, so you can see what we're talking about. But it was a memorable night. I remember we were talking about the Dream Center when we came in that January, and just how you were wanting to help. And I think that's an incredible characteristic of you, Amy, that you want to go above and beyond to help people. Can you share just where that comes from? I know obviously you've had a lot of success, so you have an amazing platform to do that, but what drives you to help people?
Well, I guess years ago when, well, let me back up. I was born into a family that was just invested in other people. Mm. I remember when I was a kid on 2 different occasions, once when I was very young, but we had young women that would come and live with us who were pregnant and had an uncertain future. And back when I was a kid, in the 60s, that was just culturally, a young woman would feel like a real outcast. And anyway, but yeah, just like we had people stay with us. When I was 7, we fostered a little brother. My parents had an open door, and even going back before that, like when I was a kid, we lived on a street that had been cut into the back of a farm. It was a farm that Nashville had kind of grown around. Now it's an office park and all this stuff, but it was, when I was a child until I was in college, it was my great-grandparents' farm. And I knew my whole life that once my great-grandmother passed on, that they had willed their entire everything to a Christian university in Nashville. It was the single largest gift ever given. But it was interesting to grow up in the shadow of a couple whose whole life was about giving. And it's funny because from my great-grandparents, I inherited 2 lamps and a daybed. And they're both in my home, and I'll turn those lamps on and go, well, there was sure no money to fight over when you died. Because they gave it all away.
Yeah.
And so I grew up with an example of people that had worked very hard for what they had, and they chose to give it to people that had not had the same opportunity. I grew up with the opportunity of education, but it was just like, I don't know, you just, even as in high school, having friends out to the farm, and they were like, this is so cool that's in your family. And I said, well, we're praying my great-grandmother lives a long time. Just enjoy it while you can, because it'll be gone. But that holding things loosely. And so that was my earliest memory of things, is that you hold them loosely. And then when I was probably 29 or 30, Mary Chapman, who is the grandmother, she's on the other side of this life now, but she was the grandmother of my first 3 kids. And in those crazy work years when it felt like I was drinking out of a fire hose, and I'd be like at the coffee pot in the morning, I'd been doing overseas interviews at 4 a.m. and I was like, I can't function. And I said, I'm supposed to be telling people about Jesus. I don't even think I've actually prayed a succinct prayer in 2 weeks. It's just like, I'm just nonstop work. And she just offhandedly said, oh, Amy, it just takes 1 good prayer a day. And for my Church of Christ judgmental upbringing, I was like, 1? Oh, do tell. She said, every day just wake up. And mind you, this is a woman who grew up with nothing. She grew up very poor. Her her mother worked in a carnival when she was a little girl, and she was a carny kid and didn't actually start first grade till she was 9, and went through the 4th grade and then married her husband. They were 14 and 17. I mean, whew. But she said, it just takes one good prayer. And she said, every day just pray, Lord, lead me today to those I need and those that need me. And let something I do, and she said, and you won't know what that is, but let something I do have eternal significance. Let something I do matter. And so that is always in my head. I mean, I've been praying that prayer almost 30 years. And so it's like, I'll meet somebody and I'll go, I wonder, like, what if they're the answer to that prayer? What if they need me? Or even weirder, what if I need them? I don't even know it, but it kind of makes your antenna go up.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is, as I've gotten older, my mind always goes to, what if the tables were turned? Years ago, I started a song with a friend of mine, Chris Eaton from London, and we were just watching the news while we were writing a song, but we were on a tea break. And I can't remember which one of us sang it first, but it was like, what if I was that mother staring from my TV? What if that were my brown-eyed baby, hungry as she could be? What if that were my family? What if that was my world? You know, and just going, the tables could have been turned.
Yeah.
And what if I were that? And then another verse of that song is, what if I were that mother and I were waiting on me? Big success, so well dressed. And it's so in my mind, you know, a lot of times I sort of learn life lessons through the songs that I write, but I'll go, okay, if the tables were turned, I would want somebody to get engaged right now, you know, engage with this situation.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's all part of that same theme that we are all so much more connected than we understand.
Yeah.
And yeah, but the tables, they can turn on a dime, and it makes you go, I want to have been caring and compassionate and merciful in the same way that I would want somebody to be that way with me.
Yeah. And we've seen that during this time with the pandemic. You know, there's been many people that have come to the Dream Center that they've normally been helping us, whether that's volunteering or donating, and
or doing backpacks.
Or doing backpacks, and they're turning to us, and you know, they're on the phone for a while, and you're thinking, okay, why aren't you getting off the phone? And you realize they don't know how to ask for help.
Yes.
Because they've never been in that predicament before. And so being able to try and come alongside folks that may not have been where they're at today, and like you said, it could turn so quickly, you know, that we can come alongside and say, we're with you, whether it's giving some groceries or a place to stay or some clothing or whatever the case may be, that we can help. Or if it's not something we can do, the network that the Dream Center in the Peoria area has is we can lead people to other areas to get help as well. So, but that, you're absolutely right that, you know, you never know when it could turn, or when you're standing in front of someone, that God may have put you there for a reason to help, and not to walk away from that nudge that God may be saying, it's your time to step up.
Yeah. And the other thing is the back and forth, like, do you need me? Do I need you? A lot of times it happens almost simultaneously. Like, I had a friend that that I hadn't seen in a long time, that had fallen on hard times, and they called and said, is it possible that I could stay at your farm? And we have a couple of old cabins out there, no running water. They do have electricity, but this is not like Ralph Lauren. This is like snakes and mice, squirrels in the walls.
Yeah.
You know, campfire? And I said, yeah, sure. And then that person was in order to get around, was borrowing our farm truck. Well, they started working on the other side of Nashville. And I said, hey, well, if you've got the truck, would you mind? We started raising beefalo. And I had reached out to urban juicers asking them what they did with all their pulp. And I said, you're like a mile away. Would you mind, while you're at your other job, picking up these scraps from urban juicer? Well, then he made contact with a brewing company, and he said, if I can get a big enough tank, I can actually bring home the scraps from urban juicer and all the hops left over from the brewing company. And then it was actually more food than our cows could eat.
Wow.
And so we went to another farmer and gave them what we didn't use. And in turn, they gave us hay. And then we took that free hay and sold it and now have a cattle trailer. And It's like, so that person came needing something and then wound up helping in a way that provided the trailer that we needed to take the beefalo to, slaughterhouse. Sorry about that. But I mean, it's just like we're all part of this giant matrix. Everybody. And as soon as you see life that way, you want to encourage somebody that's downtrodden, because you go, no, you got to take up all the space in the universe you were meant to take up, because you're vital.
Right.
You're vital to the big picture.
Yeah. Good. Well, Amy, we could talk all day, and I know you're real busy, but I just wanted to publicly thank you for what you have done for the Dream Center. Also, the friendship with me as well over the years. We didn't even touch on me coming to that farm and helping getting the camp ready. You do an amazing camp for students every year. Obviously, they couldn't do that this year, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah. But next year it will come back just as strong as ever. But I just wanted to thank you for what you've done. And I mean it, we need to get you back to Peoria to see what's been happening at the Dream Center over the last few years, because you sowed something back then that has grown so much over the years that we're appreciative for it. So
thanks, Andy.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for listening to the Dream Center podcast. We've had an amazing time here today with Amy Grant. And if you want to stay connected with the Dream Center and everything that we are doing, please go to dreamcenterpeoria.org, and you can find all different types of ministries that you can get involved in, ways that you can help financially. Also, you can see our response to the coronavirus and the many different things that we're doing right now. So please check that out. And Amy, thank you again for being on the podcast today.
Thanks, Andy.
And again, until next time, thank you, everyone.
Thanks again for listening to the Dream Center Peoria podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If you know of anyone that would be interested in hearing about what we just talked about, we would encourage you to share this episode with them. Be sure to stay tuned for future episodes. Thanks.